Good morning, guys. Let's talk about isolations and the can job part sheet, also called the $1,000,000 sheet by many people in our industry. So let's talk about isolations. What are isolations? When we say isolation, what we're talking about is system isolations instead of focusing on the part. In our company, what you'll realize is that we don't service the part, we service the entire system. So if a car comes in for a water pump, we don't just service the water pump, we look at the whole cooling system. This is a huge shift in mindset from a technical approach where a lot of people will just change the part, and then if something else goes wrong, the customer comes right back. And to the customer, it is the same exact symptom. But for us, it's like, oh, well, no, it's a different part. And that's how you get very upset customers and end up doing a lot of work for free. So an example would be, in fact, a leaking water pump. And if you just put a water pump on, it will come back, because if you don't change the thermostat that's leaking, you have the same exact problem. It'll have a leaking coolant, and the customer doesn't know any better. They're just gonna think you don't know how to fix their car, and in many ways they are right. So what is the point of isolations? It is to focus on the entire system. If a car comes in for a brake job, you look at the entire brake system. You look at the brake fluid, the brake master cylinder, the brake booster, the brake lines, the brake hoses, the calipers, and anything else that might be in relation to that. Sometimes even the struts, because if the struts are leaking and the car is nosediving, that can technically be considered part of the system, because again, even though it's a suspension component, it is directly damaging the brake system. So there's three things about isolations that you have to know why we do them. Number one, like I said, it reduces comebacks, because you're fixing the car right the first time. You're not just looking at this part, throwing a part at it and letting it go. You're actually fixing and looking at the whole system as if you would go to a doctor. They would check if you went there for a heart issue, they would check your whole cardiovascular system. That's how we like to look at things. It fixes the car right the first time, and it brings down comebacks. Therefore, it makes your customers very happy. Number two, it actually is cheaper for customers to do this, because if you're doing something in a system already, and if you're a technician, you can probably attest to this, that if you're doing a water pump and you have to do a coolant flush, it's a lot easier to do the coolant flush when you're already in the system. You've already got the system open, the fluids are out. You don't have to come open it again and bleed it out again. Same thing if it's a thermostat, it's right there. Usually you'll still save time on it again because you've drained the coolant. Sometimes it's right next to it. Other times it's just because you've already taken some things apart. And that applies to almost everything in the vehicle system. Cars are designed that way, that if you're working on the system, it's a lot easier to service it. Therefore, the price of labor will go down for the customer, and therefore they will get a better deal and get their car fixed correctly. And the third, and this is only unique to our company because we don't run flat rate, it actually allows us to make more money. In a flat rate shop, it would really not matter, because you're going to have to pay additional labor for the technician to do the work. In our case, we don't actually do the labor based on flat rate. We do it off of total profits and numbers. So therefore, the more we are able to get approved, the more money that our team makes. So that is only because the way we run our system, you can make more money. In other shops, it's a lot harder to do that. But the main two things I want to highlight is that it does fix the car right the first time. That is our main priority, to make sure that the car is fixed right so the customer doesn't come back. Because oftentimes, like I said, if you don't fix it right and it has the same symptoms, they're gonna say, hey, I just came to you and I spent all this money and it's still doing the same exact thing. In the case of the leaking water pump that was leaking coolant, it comes right back and you didn't change the thermostat, and a week later the car had 100,000 miles and it's leaking coolant, and now they're upset, and now you're doing it for free because you're trying to make your customers happy, which is the right thing to do, but it's also not the right thing to do if you're going to lose money, plus the customer loses a lot of time. Guys, I want to make sure you understand, in our industry, this is a huge problem. I see this so many times. Shops we've purchased, shops I've coached, friends of mine, they just change the part, and this destroys their profitability, but more importantly, it just destroys their customer service. They look like amateurs. I want to make sure isolations are not just about making more money. It is in fact fixing the car right the first time, and I want to drive this home, it does give the customer a discount. The making money is just a byproduct of that, because we've set up the game to win. Let's talk about the can job part sheet, because it's a huge part of how we do isolations. It should pop up here. You should be able to look at it. It's basically a cheat sheet. It's also called the $1,000,000 sheet, because shops that don't do this, they put it in their system and they start applying it to isolations. Basically, it tells you what, if you're changing one part, it tells you what to replace or what to at least check for that whole system. It is a recommendation for the customer, but is a requirement for us. Let me repeat that. It is a recommendation for the customer, the things that they have, say they're old, they haven't been replaced, it's a good idea to replace them if you're already in the system, but it's a requirement for you to go through and check everything. It's for both the back of the house and the front of the house. That's why both of them have the sheet. It's a weapon. for making sure that you run a good shop. It is a cheat sheet, like I said. It tells you what to replace or what to check for every part you're servicing, and it does cover about 80% or so of the parts that you will basically look at on a daily basis. It is a system-based approach, like I said. We're not just servicing part, we're looking at the whole system. And this sheet, in fact, the reason it's called $1 million sheet is because when shops implement it, they literally add $1 million in sales, because now they're actually fixing the car properly instead of just, part and sending it out the door. It raises your gross sale per hour. You can check out the video on that, because you're selling more parts. When you sell more parts, your gross sale per hour goes up, your part sales go up, and your sales go up. At the same time, you have more fixed cars for your customers properly, while bringing the overall price down for your customer, because you're not having to do all this extra labor when the car has to come back and you have to do it again, unfortunately. So guys, this is a huge part of the way we run our shop. It is the isolations and the can job part sheet. It will also be covered in the video about building tickets, which is coming up. Hopefully, if you have already not watched it, I'll see you on that one. Thank you very much.